When the news first arrived, it was almost unbelievable. Humanity, a species still learning its place among the stars, had received a formal invitation to attend the Deathworld Summit. The very words caused panic, excitement, and confusion all at once. The Deathworld Summit was no ordinary meeting. It was a gathering of the most dangerous, intelligent, and dominant species in the galaxy, a place where only the most resilient and cunning beings were invited. For humans, who were considered by many to be a young and relatively fragile species, this invitation was extraordinary, almost unheard of. Many scientists and political leaders on Earth were skeptical at first. Some even thought it was a hoax or some sort of cosmic experiment. But as the official interstellar message confirmed its authenticity, disbelief turned into a whirlwind of discussions and debates across nations, research centers, and even social media. The decision to select the human representatives was carefully considered. Unlike other species, whose delegates were usually warriors, rulers, or highly trained diplomats, humans sent a diverse team. Scientists, explorers, engineers, and thinkers were chosen. These were people accustomed to thinking outside the box, people who had faced dangerous situations on Earth, and had survived through creativity and collaboration rather than raw strength. The idea was not to intimidate, but to adapt, learn, and, most importantly, show the unique qualities of humanity. The selection committee spent weeks analyzing data, reviewing achievements, and debating who would be the best fit. Each representative had a record of overcoming the impossible, whether it was surviving in extreme environments, solving complex problems, or innovating under pressure. The moment the representatives were announced, the world watched closely. The media erupted with headlines praising human ingenuity, while others criticized the choice, claiming humans were too fragile to survive such a dangerous summit. Governments began preparing logistics for the unprecedented mission. Space agencies worked around the clock, constructing and testing specialized ships, protective suits, and equipment designed to help humans survive the extreme conditions of a death world. Despite the meticulous planning, there was an undercurrent of fear. Everyone knew that a single mistake could be fatal. Meanwhile, among the other species who were to attend the summit, the news of human participation was met with amusement, disbelief, and even disdain. Many delegates assumed humans were too weak, too naive, or simply not equipped to handle the challenges of a death world. Whispers circulated through interstellar communication channels. Some questioned why such a young species was allowed to attend. Others laughed openly, convinced that humans would fail spectacularly. Yet in the midst of doubt and ridicule, there was a hint of curiosity. Humans had survived on a planet filled with countless dangers, including extreme climates, predatory species, and environmental disasters. Perhaps other species thought there was something unusual about these fragile creatures that had allowed them to thrive, despite apparent weaknesses. For the humans themselves, the invitation was both an honor and a daunting challenge. The team knew that the eyes of the galaxy would be on them. Every step they took, every decision they made, would be scrutinized by species far more experienced in survival and conflict. There was no room for arrogance or overconfidence. The humans spent months preparing, studying reports about the death world, learning about its climate, terrain, and native life forms. Simulations were run repeatedly to anticipate every possible hazard. The team trained tirelessly, both physically and mentally, knowing that their adaptability and quick thinking would be tested like never before. As the day of departure approached, tension and excitement filled the air. Families, friends, and colleagues gathered at spaceports to watch the historic launch. The humans boarded their specially designed spacecraft, a blend of advanced technology and human ingenuity, is capable of enduring the extreme pressures, temperatures, and threats they might encounter. While the technology was impressive, the human spirit was even more remarkable. There was a calm determination in their eyes, a sense of purpose that seemed to radiate confidence despite the danger ahead. When the spacecraft lifted off, breaking through Earth's atmosphere, the world held its breath. It was not just a mission to another planet. It was a statement. Humans, a species often underestimated, were venturing into the heart of a galaxy that considered them insignificant. Across the cosmos, other species began to take note. The young, fragile humans were entering a world where survival was a test of intelligence, courage, and adaptability. The journey itself was long and perilous. The humans had to navigate through asteroid belts, radiation fields, and gravitational anomalies, which challenged testing their nerves and ingenuity. Every obstacle they overcame strengthened their resolve and demonstrated that humans were capable of more than most species had imagined. Upon arrival, the humans saw the Deathworld for the first time, a planet unlike anything they had ever encountered. Its landscape was harsh, jagged, and seemingly alive with danger. Volcanoes spewed ash and molten rock, massive storms raged across barren plains, and the sky was filled with strange, predatory creatures soaring above. The other delegates, already familiar with such hostile environments, moved with practiced caution. Humans, however, did not falter. They stepped onto the planet with a combination of curiosity, observation, and calm confidence. Where others saw death, humans saw opportunity. They carefully studied their surroundings, noting potential threats and resources. Their behavior was unusual to the veteran delegates who were used to fear or aggression in such conditions. Humans, it seemed, approached danger with a mindset that was as much about learning as surviving, as the humans settled in for the opening of the summit. Whispers spread among the other delegates. Who were these strange creatures that did not cower in the face of death? How could such seemingly fragile beings survive where even the strongest species struggled? The humans, meanwhile, continued to prepare themselves, discussing strategies, sharing observations, and ensuring they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Despite the intimidation and skepticism surrounding them, the human delegation remained composed. They understood that their strength lay not in brute force, but in intelligence, creativity, and the ability to adapt to unexpected situations. By the time the summit officially began, the humans had already made their first impression. They had survived the journey, adapted to the environment, and displayed a calm, analytical approach that set them apart from every other species. The Deathworld Summit, which was meant to be a gathering of the galaxy's strongest and most dominant beings, had just witnessed the arrival of a species that many had underestimated. The human representatives were ready to prove that survival was not only about strength and weapons, but about intelligence, cooperation, and the courage to face the unknown. The humans were here, their presence already challenging centuries-old assumptions about fragility and resilience. Other species watched with a mix of skepticism and intrigue, unaware that the humans were about to redefine what it meant to survive and to thrive in a death world. The first part of this incredible journey had ended, but the real test, the part that would shock everyone, was only beginning. The humans' arrival on the Death World was nothing short of remarkable. As their spacecraft descended through the planet's thick, turbulent atmosphere, the delegates of other species looked on with quiet skepticism, some even openly mocking. The Death World was infamous across galaxies for its extreme, environment-violent storms that could tear through metal. Jagged mountains sharper than any blade, rivers of molten rock, and wildlife so deadly that even seasoned explorers often avoided direct encounters. Yet when the humans stepped onto the surface, their movements were deliberate, calm, surprisingly confident. The humans wore suits designed to protect them from the harsh conditions. But compared to the heavily armored exosuits of the other delegates, they seemed almost fragile. While most other species relied on layers of technology, shielding, and weaponry, humans carried only the essentials, trusting their intellect, observation skills, and instinct. This contrast did not go unnoticed. Many delegates whispered among themselves, speculating that humans would be the first to fail, that they were too unprepared to survive even the initial hours. Despite this, the human team's behavior immediately commanded attention. They did not rush or panic in the face of danger. Instead, they moved with a mixture of caution and curiosity, carefully studying the terrain, observing the patterns of the deadly creatures around them, and testing the limits of their environment. Other species moved rigidly, calculating every step, fearful of every shadow and gust of wind. Humans, however, seemed almost playful in their approach. They documented strange plants, unusual minerals, and hazardous creatures with methodical interest, as if they were exploring a new laboratory rather than entering a world designed to kill. The initial encounters with the local wildlife were particularly shocking to the other delegates. Massive predators, some with scales harder than steel and claws sharper than any tool, prowled the area. Where other species would immediately attack or retreat, humans studied the animals' behavior. They noticed patterns in their movements. Understanding which creatures were territorial, which were scavengers, and which posed immediate threats. Rather than trying to dominate or kill everything in sight, humans used observation and strategic avoidance. If a predator approached, humans moved calmly, signaling to one another without panic. They used subtle distractions, natural camouflage, and careful navigation to pass dangerous zones safely. This approach, unfamiliar and seemingly risky to other species, worked far better than brute force in many situations. What impressed observers even more was the humans' teamwork. Unlike other species, which often relied on individual strength or hierarchical command, humans communicated constantly, shared responsibilities, and adapted quickly to unexpected situations. If one human discovered a hidden danger, the information was immediately relayed to the rest of the group. If another team member encountered difficulty, others would assist without hesitation. Their cooperation was seamless, almost instinctive, and it made them appear stronger than their individual abilities might suggest. Many delegates began to realize that the human strength was not just in their intellect, but in their ability to work together, combining knowledge, experience, and creativity in real time. The terrain itself tested every species present. Steep cliffs, treacherous ravines, and shifting ground forced delegates to think carefully about every movement. Humans approached these obstacles with a combination of caution and ingenuity. Where others relied on brute force or cumbersome technology to cross a chasm, humans quickly devised clever solutions: ropes made from natural fibers, makeshift bridges using fallen rocks, and even simple levers to shift large objects. Their solutions were rarely flashy, but they were effective and resourceful, earning puzzled looks from other species. Some of the older, more experienced delegates had spent centuries honing strength-based techniques to navigate such terrain, yet they could not match the humans' speed, adaptability, or creativity in these situations. Even the storms, which could rip trees from the ground and toss debris like deadly missiles, did not deter the humans. Instead of hiding or panicking, they carefully monitored wind patterns, timed their movements, and made calculated dashes from one sheltered area to another. They treated the storm not just as a threat, but as part of the environment to understand and navigate. While other delegates huddled and waited for the danger to pass, humans used the same intelligence and observation that had guided them through countless other challenges to move efficiently, minimizing risk while continuing their mission. Their interaction with the Deathworld's flora was equally astonishing. The planet's plants were often toxic or carnivorous, yet humans approached them with scientific curiosity rather than fear. They carefully collected samples, noted unique properties, and even found ways to use some plants as tools or protective measures. This behavior was completely different from the other delegates, who mostly avoided all plant life out of fear of danger. The humans' willingness to explore and understand the unknown not only helped them survive, but also turned the environment into an asset rather than a constant threat. The reactions of the other delegates were mixed. Some species were visibly confused, unable to comprehend why humans seemed so calm and capable in such a hostile world. Others were secretly impressed, recognizing that humans' unconventional approach, focusing on intelligence, observation, and teamwork, was incredibly effective. A few whispered about the peculiar courage of humans, noting that their behavior suggested a type of resilience and adaptability that many species had underestimated. Despite initial doubts, it became clear that humans were not just surviving, they were learning, thriving, and even excelling in ways that others could not predict. As the day progressed, the humans continued to demonstrate their unique approach. When they encountered a massive, aggressive predator, the humans did not panic. They observed, noted patterns, and then created a subtle diversion using nearby rocks and plants, allowing them to pass safely. Other species relied on overwhelming strength or advanced weaponry, often putting themselves at greater risk in the process. The humans' methods were quiet, intelligent, and highly effective, leaving observers both stunned and curious by the time the sun set on the Deathworld. The human delegation had already made a lasting impression. They had survived encounters that others had feared, explored dangerous terrain without serious injury, and demonstrated a level of adaptability and cooperation that many species had never seen before. The delegates, who had initially assumed humans were weak and unprepared, were forced to reconsider their assumptions. Whispers of admiration began to circulate, mixed with disbelief and a growing respect for the resilience and ingenuity of this young species from a distant planet. Even in the quiet moments of rest, the humans continued their work. They carefully recorded observations, shared insights with one another, and planned their strategies for the days ahead. There was no arrogance, no show of superiority, just a focused determination to understand the Deathworld, survive, and prove that humans were capable of more than anyone had imagined. Their calm, methodical approach contrasted sharply with the fear and aggression of other species, making it clear that humans' greatest weapons were not claws or armor, but their minds, adaptability, and cooperation. By the end of this phase, it was obvious to all delegates that humans were unlike any species they had encountered before, where others relied on intimidation, aggression, or advanced technology. Humans relied on creativity, intelligence, and teamwork. They turned challenges into opportunities, observed dangers without panic, and adapted to every obstacle the Deathworld threw at them. Even the skeptics could no longer deny that humans possessed a unique resilience, one that could not be measured by brute strength alone. The first day on the Deathworld concluded with a profound shift in perception. Humans were no longer seen as fragile or naive. They had arrived, they had survived, and they had already begun to earn the cautious respect of the galaxy's most experienced and dangerous species. What had started as doubt and ridicule was slowly turning into intrigue and admiration. Humans had demonstrated that survival on the Deathworld was not just about being strong or equipped, it was about being intelligent, adaptable, and willing to face the unknown with courage and curiosity. As night fell, the humans gathered to review their observations and plan their next moves. Other species, watching from a distance, could not help but wonder what this strange, seemingly fragile species would do next. If the first day was any indication, humans were not just participants in the summit, they were forces to be reckoned with, capable of defying expectations and shocking everyone with their resilience, creativity, and courage. It was clear that the humans' arrival on the Deathworld had already begun to change the way other species thought about survival, intelligence, and the underestimated potential of a seemingly ordinary species. The story of their first day would be remembered as the moment when humans showed the galaxy that true strength could come from curiosity, teamwork, and the courage to face even the deadliest world with calm and intelligence. Asterisk, the Deathworld Summit officially began with a ceremony unlike anything humans had ever witnessed. Delegates from countless species, each more formidable and alien than the last, gathered in the vast central hall, a structure carved from the living rock of the planet itself. Its walls pulsed with faint bioluminescent patterns, as if the planet itself were observing the proceedings. The air was thick with anticipation and tension, each species sizing up the others, measuring strength, intelligence, and influence. Humans, however, remained calm, their expressions steady, their eyes observant, quietly taking in the grandeur and danger surrounding them. The summit was not a casual meeting. It was a contest of ideas, strategy, and survival. Every delegate's reputation, and in some cases their species' standing, was on the line. Other species began with formal introductions, displaying strength, wealth, or dominance. Some flaunted powerful weapons, others demonstrated psychic abilities. While a few relied on history, lineage, or ancient knowledge, the atmosphere was electric with competition, each species trying to assert their superiority. To make it clear, that they were the most capable, the most intelligent, the most deserving of influence at the summit. When it was the humans' turn, the room went quiet. Some delegates snickered, clearly expecting a weak display. Humans were young, fragile, and unarmed compared to the overwhelming displays of other species. But the humans did not falter. They did not rush to assert dominance, nor did they attempt to impress with raw power. Instead, they spoke in calm, clear voices, presenting themselves with honesty and humility. Their opening statements were simple, almost understated, yet carried an unmistakable confidence. They spoke of their curiosity, their adaptability, and their willingness to cooperate rather than dominate. At first, many species dismissed them. They assumed humans were naive, inexperienced, and lacking the sophistication required to contribute meaningfully to discussions about survival, diplomacy, and interstellar strategy. But as humans continued, it became clear that their simplicity was deceptive. They asked questions that other delegates had never considered, questioning assumptions, challenging long-held beliefs, and suggesting innovative solutions to problems that had stumped even the most intelligent species. Where others relied on intimidation or tradition, humans relied on logic, empathy, and creative thinking. One of the earliest debates focused on the approach to survival on extreme worlds like Deathworlds. Many species argued for aggression, emphasizing the need to dominate both the environment and other species to ensure survival. Humans, in contrast, proposed a different philosophy. They suggested observation, understanding, and adaptation. They argued that survival did not always require force. Sometimes it required patience, cooperation, and innovation. Their perspective was unusual, almost radical, and it caused murmurs throughout the hall. Some species were intrigued, recognizing that humans' ideas had merit. Others scoffed, convinced that such strategies were too weak to be effective. The humans' willingness to speak openly and honestly also shocked the other delegates. In many species, diplomacy and negotiation were highly formalized, often involving deception, exaggeration, or intimidation. Humans, however, approached discussion with straightforward honesty. They admitted limitations when necessary, acknowledged uncertainty, and focused on practical solutions rather than empty displays of strength. This approach was disarming. Delegates who were used to posturing and bluffing found themselves confronted with a species that communicated clearly and directly, yet without arrogance. It was both refreshing and confusing, challenging the deeply ingrained expectations of many of the summit's participants. As discussions continued, humans consistently impressed through their creativity and adaptability. When presented with hypothetical survival challenges, they did not rely on brute force or advanced technology alone. Instead, they analyzed situations, identified patterns, and devised multiple strategies. They considered not just immediate survival, but long-term consequences, relationships with other species, and potential opportunities hidden within threats. Other species often focus narrowly on what they considered the obvious solution, but humans explored options that seemed unconventional, sometimes even risky, but were remarkably effective. One particularly intense debate involved a scenario where delegates had to secure a resource region of the Deathworld. Other species immediately discussed weapons, defenses, and combat strategies. Humans, however, approached the problem differently. They suggested careful mapping, understanding the environment, and negotiating with native species when possible. They emphasized collaboration among delegates rather than conflict, proposing alliances that could benefit multiple parties while reducing unnecessary risk. This strategy initially drew skepticism, but when humans presented data, past examples, and logical reasoning, even the most cynical delegates were forced to acknowledge the potential of their approach. The humans' ability to question assumptions extended beyond survival strategies. They challenged the very way other species perceived intelligence and strength. They asked why certain behaviors were considered superior, why aggression was valued over cooperation, and why tradition was not always questioned. These questions were uncomfortable for many, yet they sparked important discussions. Some delegates grew defensive, unwilling to confront the possibility that their entire approach might be flawed. Others, however, were genuinely intrigued, recognizing that humans brought a fresh perspective that could offer solutions to problems that had persisted for centuries. Throughout the summit, humans remained observant, carefully noting the reactions of other delegates. They watched four patterns in behavior: alliances forming, tensions rising, and opportunities for negotiation. While other species often relied on instinct or habit, humans applied reason and analysis, gathering information before taking action. Their patience and attention to detail allowed them to anticipate conflicts, mediate disagreements, and propose creative solutions that others had overlooked. Even species known for cunning and strategy found themselves surprised by humans' ability to think several steps ahead, adapting in real time to a dynamic and often hostile environment. The reactions of other species varied widely. Some were impressed, recognizing that humans' combination of intelligence, adaptability, and calm confidence made them formidable, even in a hostile setting. Others were confused, struggling to reconcile humans' apparent fragility with their effectiveness in discussions. A few remained dismissive, convinced that humans' unconventional methods would ultimately fail. Yet as the summit progressed, it became increasingly clear that humans were not simply participants. They were challengers to the status quo, demonstrating that there were alternative ways to survive, negotiate, and thrive in the galaxy. Humans also displayed remarkable humility throughout the proceedings. They did not boast or seek to dominate others through speech or action. Instead, they focused on contributing meaningfully, listening carefully to the perspectives of other species, and building bridges where possible. This approach earned respect from some of the most experienced and powerful delegates, who began to see that strength was not always measured by weapons, psychic ability, or size, but by intelligence, empathy, and the ability to think creatively under pressure. By the end of the first day of discussions, the humans had already made an impact. They had challenged assumptions, offered innovative strategies, and demonstrated a level of insight and adaptability that many species had not anticipated. Where others had relied on tradition, aggression, or intimidation, humans relied on observation, reasoning, and collaboration. Their calm, thoughtful approach contrasted sharply with the often rigid and aggressive tactics of other delegates, making it clear that humans were a species capable of redefining expectations about intelligence, survival, and diplomacy. Even outside the formal discussions, humans continued to observe, learn, and interact with the other delegates. They asked questions, shared insights, and sought to understand the motivations and behaviors of the other species. Their curiosity was genuine, and their willingness to engage respectfully with even the most intimidating delegates earned them allies, if not always immediate trust. Other species, who had initially assumed humans were weak, began to see them as unpredictable, clever, and surprisingly capable. The humans' presence at the summit began to ripple through the other species. Delegates who had come expecting an easy target now found themselves reconsidering assumptions. Leaders who had relied on intimidation began to recognize that humans' calm intelligence made them difficult to manipulate or underestimate. Even skeptics admitted that humans' ideas and strategies were effective in ways that brute force alone could never achieve. By the end of this phase of the summit, it was evident that humans were not just surviving, they were influencing, challenging, and reshaping the conversation in a room filled with the galaxy's most dangerous and intelligent beings. As the first day concluded, humans gathered to discuss their observations and plan their next moves. They remained humble, aware that the challenges of the Deathworld summit were far from over. Yet their confidence was growing. They had demonstrated that their unique combination of intelligence, adaptability, and collaboration was more than a match for the assumptions and expectations of even the most formidable species. The summit, which had begun as a test of strength and survival, was already becoming a stage where humans' ingenuity and perspective could shine. Humans had not only survived their first day of formal summit activities, but had also begun to earn respect, intrigue, and cautious admiration from other species. Their calm, logical, and creative approach challenged centuries of tradition and expectation. For many delegates, it was the first time they had encountered a species that could survive and even excel without relying on aggression, its overwhelming power, or ancient authority. Humans had proven that their greatest strength lay not in dominance, but in intelligence, cooperation, and the courage to face the unknown with curiosity and reason. Asterisk, the true test of the Deathworld. Summit was not in speeches or debates, but in action. The field demonstration was the most feared event of the entire gathering, a challenge designed to push every delegate to their absolute limits. Each species was required to navigate the most hazardous areas of the Deathworld while completing a series of tasks that tested intelligence, adaptability, and survival skills. It was a challenge that had humbled even the most experienced delegates in previous centuries, and many believed that humans, despite their surprising performance in discussions, would fail spectacularly when faced with the planet's deadly realities. From the moment the demonstration began, it was clear that the humans' approach would be different. Other species immediately resorted to their familiar strategies: brute force, overwhelming technology, psychic manipulation, or aggressive intimidation. They launched themselves into the terrain with power and speed, using strength and weapons to subdue threats before they could become problems. Massive creatures were confronted with energy blasts or crushing attacks. Deadly plants were destroyed, and hazardous terrain was overcome with extreme armor or mechanical devices. It was an impressive display of power. Yet there was a sense of predictability. Every move was measured, every decision calculated based on centuries of experience. Humans, in contrast, moved with a calm precision that startled the observers. They did not attempt to dominate every obstacle in their path. Instead, they studied it. They observed patterns, identified risks, and considered the consequences of each action. When a river of molten rock blocked their path, they did not attempt to blast through it or jump recklessly. They examined the terrain upstream, noting stable rocks and natural bridges, and used tools and materials from the environment to construct a safe crossing. Where other species relied on sheer force, humans relied on intelligence, creativity, and observation. Their methods were slower in some ways, but incredibly effective, and far less risky than the reckless aggression of many delegates. One of the first major challenges was a vast field of predatory creatures. These beings were massive, with claws, teeth, and jaws capable of ripping through the toughest armor. Many delegates immediately attacked, attempting to drive them back with overwhelming force. The humans, however, assessed the creatures' behavior. They noticed that the predators were territorial but predictable in their movements. Instead of fighting, the humans carefully timed their path. Using subtle distractions to divert attention and avoid direct confrontation, they worked as a team, coordinating their movements, ensuring that no one was left vulnerable. Observers could hardly believe that a species so small and seemingly fragile could navigate such danger without injury. The humans' teamwork was another aspect that stood out. While many species acted individually, relying on their own strength or abilities, humans constantly communicated. If one member discovered a hazard, they signaled to the others. If another faced a difficult situation, teammates immediately assisted. The delegation moved like a single organism, anticipating each other's needs and covering one another in ways that were almost instinctive. This seamless cooperation allowed them to accomplish tasks that would have been impossible alone, and it left other delegates questioning how a species so young and inexperienced could operate with such efficiency. The humans' creativity became even more apparent as the demonstration progressed. In one section, they faced a maze of razor-sharp rocks and sudden chasms, a landscape designed to trap or injure the unprepared. Many species relied on heavy armor, energy shields, or brute force to navigate the area, often sustaining damage or becoming trapped. Humans, however, studied the environment and used available resources in innovative ways. They created stepping stones from broken rock, constructed levers to shift large boulders, and even used local flora as tools for balance or protection. Every obstacle became an opportunity for problem-solving rather than a threat to be overcome with aggression. Perhaps the most astonishing moment came during an encounter with a massive, aggressive predator known as the Shardclaw, a creature whose reputation alone was enough to intimidate even the strongest species. The Shardclaw was fast, intelligent, and deadly, capable of tearing apart armored vehicles and experienced hunters with ease. Most delegates prepared for battle, gathering weapons and forming defensive formations. Humans, however, did something unexpected. They observed the Shardclaw's movements, studying its patterns and weaknesses. Using careful coordination, they distracted the creature with harmless noise and subtle movements while quietly creating an escape route. When the Shardclaw lunged, humans moved with precision, avoiding attack without harming the creature. To the astonishment of the other species, humans completed the task without a single injury or unnecessary confrontation. This display of intelligence, patience, and control shocked everyone watching. The humans' interactions with the terrain itself were equally remarkable. Where other delegates viewed dangerous features as obstacles to be overcome by force, humans treated them as puzzles to be understood. They noted unstable ground, calculated safe paths, and observed environmental cues that indicated potential threats. They adapted in real time, altering their approach as conditions changed. Rather than sticking rigidly to a pre-planned strategy, their ability to think creatively under pressure, combined with a deep awareness of their surroundings, allowed them to navigate areas that had confounded other species for generations. Even more surprising was the humans' willingness to help others. While the Deathworld Summit was designed to test individual and species-level survival, humans frequently assisted delegates from other species who were struggling. If a creature attacked an opponent, humans would intervene strategically, not with aggression, but by creating distractions or solutions that allowed the endangered delegate to escape. If a species became trapped in a hazardous area, humans offered guidance and assistance, using their ingenuity to create a safe path. Many delegates were confused by this behavior, initially suspicious of humans' intentions. Yet it soon became apparent that humans were not seeking glory or dominance. They were focused on survival, problem-solving, and the larger goal of completing the demonstration successfully. Throughout the day, the humans' calm demeanor, intelligence, and resourcefulness began to alter perceptions among the other delegates. Those who had initially doubted humans' abilities were forced to acknowledge that this species had a unique approach to danger. While other species relied on power, intimidation, or traditional methods, humans relied on creativity, adaptability, and collaboration. They consistently turned situations that seemed impossible into manageable challenges, often completing tasks more efficiently and safely than other, more physically powerful species. By the afternoon, the humans had gained a reputation as the most unpredictable participants in the demonstration. Delegates could not anticipate their moves, nor could they rely on conventional strategies to compete with them. The humans' approach calm, analytical, and cooperative deified centuries of precedent at the Deathworld Summit. Even seasoned veterans who had navigated countless hazardous worlds admitted that humans' methods were not only effective, but remarkable. Many began to whisper about the peculiar resilience of humans, recognizing that this species possessed a type of ingenuity and courage that was rarely seen in the galaxy. The human success was not just in surviving the physical challenges, but in demonstrating a philosophy that was as radical as it was effective. They showed that intelligence and creativity could overcome brute strength, that observation and cooperation could surpass raw aggression, and that courage was not about fearlessness, but about facing danger with calm, calculated action. Their performance challenged long-held assumptions, forcing delegates to rethink what it truly meant to survive on a death world. As the demonstration drew to a close, humans had completed every task with remarkable success. They had navigated hazardous terrain, avoided or outsmarted deadly predators, solved complex environmental puzzles, and assisted others, all without unnecessary conflict or injury. The reactions of the other delegates ranged from awe to disbelief. Some species were impressed and even inspired, realizing that humans had redefined the standards of survival. Others remained skeptical, unwilling to fully admit that humans' unconventional methods were superior in many situations. Yet no one could deny that humans had exceeded expectations and left an indelible mark on the summit. At the end of the day, humans gathered to assess their performance and review their observations. They remained humble, recognizing that the challenges of the Deathworld summit were far from over. Yet, there was a quiet satisfaction in their eyes. They had proven that their approach, intelligence, adaptability, teamwork, and creative problem-solving was not only viable, but highly effective, even in the deadliest environment imaginable. By the conclusion of the field demonstration, it was clear that humans had earned the respect of many delegates, where once they had been dismissed as fragile and inexperienced. They were now regarded as clever, resourceful, and remarkably resilient. The story of humans at the Deathworld summit was spreading quickly, with whispers about their ingenuity, bravery, and unusual methods circulating among delegates and observers alike. Even in the days that followed, the humans' performance in the field demonstration remained a topic of discussion. Their ability to survive, thrive, and assist others without resorting to aggression challenged every assumption about strength, intelligence, and survival. Humans had not only participated, they had changed perceptions, demonstrating that courage, creativity, and cooperation could be as powerful as weapons, armor, or psychic ability. The field demonstration concluded, but the humans' impact was undeniable. They had survived the deadliest challenges, assisted others, and proved that unconventional thinking and teamwork could outmatch brute force and tradition. Other species began to take note, reconsidering their own strategies and philosophies in light of the humans' remarkable performance. By the end of this phase, it was evident that humans were no longer seen as the weakest participants. They were a species to be respected, observed carefully, and perhaps even feared not for aggression, but for their ingenuity, adaptability, and the quiet, shocking strength that had allowed them to excel where others might have failed. The final phase of the Deathworld summit was not about tests, demonstrations, or survival challenges. It was about reflection, judgment, and understanding. By this point, every species present had observed the humans closely. They had seen their calm intelligence, their creativity, and their uncanny ability to navigate impossible challenges. Delegates whispered in corners, comparing notes and discussing what they had witnessed. Many admitted privately that they had underestimated humans from the start. What had initially seemed like fragility and naivety had been replaced with awe and even admiration. Yet the summit was not over, and humans had one more challenge: to leave a lasting impression, to prove that their way of thinking could change how the galaxy viewed survival, intelligence. In cooperation, the humans gathered in a quiet area to review everything they had experienced. They analyzed the terrain, the creatures, and even the behaviors of other delegates. Unlike many species who relied on instinct, pride, or tradition to guide them, humans reflected deeply. They discussed what worked, what didn't, and how they could apply these lessons not only for themselves, but potentially for other species as well. Their approach was holistic, considering the big picture, rather than focusing solely on immediate survival or competition. This mindset alone set them apart. But the summit required more than reflection. It required action that could leave a permanent mark. The final event was a combination of a survival test and a diplomatic exercise. Delegates were asked to collaborate to solve a complex challenge involving both the environment and the local life forms. The task was designed to see which species could think beyond themselves, anticipate problems, and work creatively with others. While many species approached the task with a focus on their own success securing resources, defending their position, or eliminating perceived threats, the humans took a very different approach. They immediately sought to understand the problem fully, gathering data and observing the environment. They looked at potential risks to all participants, not just themselves, and considered ways to benefit multiple species simultaneously. The other delegates were initially confused. Humans seemed to ignore traditional competitive instincts. where other species would push forward aggressively, claiming territory or resources. Humans paused to study, discuss, and plan. Yet, despite moving slower than the fastest species, they were surprisingly effective. They identified hazards that others had overlooked, found solutions that required minimal conflict, and adapted quickly as unexpected challenges arose. Their calm composure and logical problem-solving made them appear almost untouchable. Delegates who had relied on sheer power were forced to reconsider their strategies in real time. One of the most remarkable moments came when humans discovered a dangerous environmental anomaly, an unstable region of the Deathworld that could collapse or erupt at any moment. Many species would have avoided it or tried to dominate it with force. Humans, however, approached the problem differently. They studied the area, identified warning signs, and devised a plan that allowed not only themselves, but also delegates from other species to navigate it safely, using clever tools, makeshift bridges, and coordinated teamwork. They transformed a potentially deadly situation into a manageable one. Other species watched in astonishment. The humans had done what none of them could imagine. They had turned a threat into an opportunity, not just for themselves, but for everyone involved. Throughout the event, humans continued to help others, a behavior that was unusual, if not shocking, to the other delegates. While many species focused entirely on their own survival and gain, humans prioritized communication, coordination, and mutual benefit. They guided others through hazardous zones, shared knowledge about dangerous creatures, and even warned other species of environmental risks. Some delegates were skeptical of this generosity, expecting deception or manipulation. Yet the humans remained consistent. They acted with integrity, showing that cooperation did not mean weakness, and that helping others could also ensure their own survival by the end of the day. It became clear that humans had achieved something remarkable. They had not only survived every challenge, but had also redefined the concept of resilience and intelligence. Other species began to acknowledge that humans' approach combining creativity, observation, teamwork, and empathy was incredibly effective in ways that brute force, technology, or tradition alone could not match. They had proven that adaptability, intelligence, and cooperation were just as critical, if not more so, than physical strength or weaponry in ensuring survival on a death world. The final moments of the summit were filled with reflection and acknowledgement. Leaders of various species approached the humans, some to congratulate, others to express surprise, and a few to seek advice. The humans, true to their nature, engaged politely, sharing insights about their methods, discussing what they had learned, and listening to the experiences of others. In doing so, they not only left a strong impression, but also opened the door to future cooperation, diplomacy, and understanding among the galaxy's species. One delegate, a massive warrior species known for its aggression, admitted that humans had changed the way they viewed survival. "I thought strength alone ruled this world," the delegate said, "but you have shown me that observation, patience, and cooperation can be far more powerful than brute force." This sentiment was echoed by others, including species that had been dismissive or skeptical from the start. Humans had shifted perceptions. They had turned the notion of weakness into an advantage, demonstrating that ingenuity and adaptability were forms of strength just as formidable as physical power, even beyond the summit. Humans' influence began to spread. Stories of their performance circulated across the galaxy, inspiring young species and challenging established doctrines. Scholars debated humans' methods, while strategists reconsidered long-held approaches to survival and diplomacy. What had been intended as a simple participation in a summit became a turning point for interstellar understanding. Humans, a species once underestimated, had become a symbol of ingenuity, courage, and the unexpected power of collaboration. The humans themselves were humble about their achievements. They did not boast or claim superiority. They had faced the same dangers as everyone else, and had simply applied their unique perspective. Their strength lay in their curiosity, their willingness to learn, and their ability to adapt to challenges. They had proved that survival and success were not just about being the strongest or most aggressive, but about thinking critically, cooperating with others, and remaining calm under pressure. As the summit concluded, humans prepared to leave the death world. Other species watched them with a mixture of respect, admiration, and curiosity. Humans had arrived as underdogs, underestimated by nearly every delegate. They had faced deadly terrain, aggressive predators, complex challenges, and skepticism from powerful species. Yet, through intelligence, teamwork, and creativity, they had succeeded in ways that shocked everyone. Their performance had not only earned respect, but had also inspired a new understanding of what it meant to survive and thrive in the galaxy. The departure of the human delegation was quiet but significant. Their success was not measured in trophies, victories, or displays of power, but in the impression they left on every species present. The whispers and conversations that followed the summit reflected a universal acknowledgement. Humans were extraordinary. They had redefined expectations, challenged traditions, and demonstrated that resilience was as much about the mind, spirit, as it was about strength or weapons. When humans finally returned to their spacecraft, the atmosphere was a mix of relief, pride, and anticipation. They had survived the deadliest world in the galaxy, earned the respect of countless species, and proved that their approach combining intelligence, observation, creativity, and cooperation was not only viable, but powerful. They knew that their journey had implications far beyond the summit itself. Their actions had shown that a species considered weak or fragile could rise above expectations and inspire change on a galactic scale. As they left the death world behind, humans looked back at the landscape that had tested them so severely. They remembered the towering cliffs, the deadly predators, the shifting terrain, and the storms that had challenged their every step. But more importantly, they remembered the lessons learned, the importance of teamwork, the power of observation, the value of creativity, and the strength that comes from calm, calculated action. These were not just survival skills. They were principles that would guide humanity in the future, both on Earth and among the stars. Humans had achieved what few species ever did. They had not only survived the Deathworld Summit, but had also transformed perceptions of what it meant to be strong, intelligent, and resilient. They had demonstrated that true power came from a combination of mind, spirit, and collaboration, and they had done so without aggression or intimidation. In the eyes of the galaxy, humans had become a species to be respected, observed, perhaps even emulated, a living example that the least expected response can sometimes shock the universe itself. The summit closed with ceremonies, formal acknowledgments, and the exchange of knowledge among species. Humans received accolades, not for dominance, but for their ingenuity and exemplary conduct. They had set a new standard, proving that unconventional thinking, courage, and cooperation could achieve results that brute force alone could never match. As they departed, the legacy of their presence remained. A story that would be remembered and shared for generations. A story of a young, underestimated species that rose to the challenge of the deadliest world and left the galaxy in awe,